It was a peaceful Saturday morning. The sun had just begun its climb into the sky, casting a warm golden light over everything. The birds chirped in the trees, and the air was crisp, fresh, and full of promise. It was the perfect kind of day to lose myself in my garden. After all, gardening had become a ritual for me over the past few months. I had recently moved into a quiet neighborhood, a place where people rarely bothered each other. It was exactly what I was looking for: a little solitude, a lot of peace, and a chance to reconnect with nature. The small garden in my backyard was nothing fancy, just a few raised beds where I had planted some herbs, vegetables, and flowers. There was something therapeutic about tending to them, feeling the soil in my hands, and watching life bloom from the seeds I had carefully placed in the earth. Today, I was planting a few more herbs: rosemary, thyme, and lavender. I loved the smell of lavender, and the thought of it growing alongside the rosemary and thyme filled me with satisfaction. As I knelt down, digging my hands into the rich, damp soil, I felt a deep sense of calm settle over me. But it wasn't long before I felt a strange shift in the atmosphere. The air suddenly seemed heavier. I couldn't quite place it, but something was different. I stood up and wiped my hands on my jeans, looking around. The sun had risen higher, casting longer shadows. The neighborhood around me seemed still, too still. There were no children playing in their yards, no distant sounds of cars driving by, and no voices. The silence was almost oppressive. As I stood there, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in my stomach, I heard footsteps crunching on gravel. I turned to find my neighbor Peter walking toward me. Peter was an older man, probably in his early 60s, with graying hair and a somewhat stiff demeanor. He wasn't the kind of person you'd call friendly, but he wasn't unfriendly either. He had always been quiet, keeping to himself most of the time. Our conversations had been brief, mostly consisting of greetings when we crossed paths. Today, however, Peter didn't have his usual calm expression. His face was drawn, his brow furrowed, and there was an unmistakable tension in his body language. As he came closer, I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. I couldn't explain it, but something about the way he was walking, the urgency in his steps, it was unsettling. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual as I stood up from my gardening spot and wiped the dirt from my hands. "Nice day to be outside." Peter didn't respond immediately. He simply stood there, eyes fixed on me, as though he was searching for the right words. His eyes were dark, almost too intense, and I felt my heart race slightly. "You've been gardening a lot lately," he said finally, his voice low and heavy with something I couldn't quite place. "How long have you been at it?" I shrugged. "A few weeks now. It's kind of therapeutic, you know?" Peter didn't seem to care much about the gardening itself. His gaze drifted to the plants, but his attention never wavered from me. "There's something you need to know," he said suddenly, his voice tense. "Something you need to be careful about." My stomach tightened, and I felt a chill run through me. This was different. This wasn't just a neighborly chat. "What do you mean?" I asked, a lump forming in my throat. Peter glanced over his shoulder, checking to see if anyone was nearby. The neighborhood was as quiet as ever, the houses empty, the streets deserted. Then he took a step closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "It's the plants," he said, his tone serious. "They're not what they seem." I stared at Peter, unsure of whether I had heard him right. "The plants," I repeated, my voice faltering slightly. "What do you mean?" "They're just herbs: rosemary, lavender, thyme." Peter's eyes darkened, and he shook his head slowly, almost sadly. "You don't understand," he said, stepping closer until he was nearly right in front of me. "These plants, they're dangerous. They attract things." My heart skipped a beat. Dangerous? I didn't know how to react. I had been growing these herbs for weeks, and they had been nothing but calming, comforting. "What do you mean, attract things?" I asked, my voice a mix of confusion and fear. "What kind of things?" Peter took another deep breath, as if trying to calm himself before speaking. "There's a presence here," he said quietly. "It's ancient. It's tied to the land. And these plants, these herbs, they draw it in. It's why the neighborhood is so quiet. Why everything seems too perfect. It's not natural." I laughed nervously, unsure of whether to take him seriously. "Peter, you're scaring me. What are you talking about?" This is a quiet neighborhood, sure, but it's peaceful. There's nothing. He cut me off sharply, his eyes narrowing. It's peaceful because they've been here watching. And if you're not careful, you'll attract more than just peace. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and foreboding. I wanted to laugh it off, to dismiss it as nonsense, but something about Peter's face, the seriousness in his eyes, made me hesitate. What do you mean, watching? I asked, my voice trembling now. Who's been watching? What do you mean, they? Peter's gaze flickered around the yard once more before he spoke. There are things in this neighborhood, things that have been here long before any of us. And they've been watching. They've been waiting. The more Peter spoke, the more my head spun. I had never experienced anything strange in this neighborhood. Everything had been so normal, so peaceful. But now, with Peter's words lingering in the air, I began to question everything. You're not the first to plant here, Peter continued. There have been others before you. People who have come and gone. Some left, some disappeared. But they all had one thing in common. What's that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. They all planted, he said, his voice grim. They all thought they were just planting herbs, just making their gardens look nice. But they didn't understand what they were inviting. I stepped back, shaking my head. Peter, this doesn't make any sense. You're telling me that planting herbs, rosemary, thyme, lavender, can bring whatever you're talking about here. Peter's eyes softened with regret. I didn't believe it either at first. But when I started planting, when I saw what happened to the others, I knew. The plants attract attention. The wrong kind of attention. I stood there, frozen, unable to speak. My heart was pounding in my chest, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I wanted to tell him he was crazy, that he was overthinking things. But deep down, something told me there was more truth to his words than I was ready to admit. Peter didn't stay long. After that conversation, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing in my garden, alone with my thoughts. I stood there for a long time, staring at the plants in my garden. They looked so innocent, so harmless. But now, every time I looked at them, I saw something else. I saw danger. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I started paying more attention to the little details around me. The strange quiet that seemed to settle over the neighborhood. The way the air felt heavy at times. The subtle noises that seemed to echo in the distance. I thought about Peter's warning, and the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. There had been neighbors who had moved out suddenly, without explanation. And there had been strange rumors about people disappearing. People who had lived in this neighborhood for years and then, one day, were simply gone. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. It wasn't until one night a week later that everything came to a head. I was in my garden again, just before sunset, when I noticed something strange. The plants seemed to be moving. The wind was light, but the plants swayed in an unnatural way, as though they were being pulled by an invisible force. I could hear whispers in the air, soft, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to come from all around me. My heart raced, and I stumbled backward, panic rising in my chest. I knew then that Peter's words had been true. There was something in this neighborhood, something old and dark, and it was tied to the land itself. And now it was watching me. I froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. The air grew thick and heavy, and the whispers grew louder. My garden, once my sanctuary, had become a trap. I had planted something much darker than herbs in my garden. And now I was paying the price. Have you ever felt like you were being watched? Or like something was lurking just out of sight? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done if you were in my place? Let's keep the conversation going. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling tales.